That's what every husband says after.
We're going to go ahead and call the redistricting meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Member Chaplin.
Here.
Member Chavez.
Here.
Member Krajewski. Member Ozark.
Here.
Member Pachowski.
Here.
Member Rutledge.
Here.
And Member Zay.
Here. Okay, pursuant to the Illinois Attorney General's guidance to public bodies on the Open Meetings Act during COVID-19 pandemic dated July 2nd, 2020, county board members may participate without being physically present in compliance with the established provisions. So is there a motion to make those members participating by Zoom members of the committee? Do I have a motion?
Second.
A motion is second.
I'm sorry.
Rutledge.
Roll call, please.
Yeah. Motion second. Thank you. Member Rutledge. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Aye.
Member Zay.
Aye.
Member Chaplin.
Aye.
Member Chavez.
Aye.
Member Krajewski. Member Ozark.
Aye.
Member Pachowski.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No, sir, we do not.
No?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Okay, chairman's remarks. I'll just move on. I want to thank everybody. It looks like we got a full house here. And obviously things have changed a little bit since the last meeting. So we'll just, we'll talk about that during redistricting consultant update. So is there a motion to approve the April 20th, 2021 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I
Moved by
have a
member
comment.
Chaplins. Yes.
I would just like to have those read aloud for the record. Number 5, chairman's remarks, and number 6, discussion, please. And I think
Okay, who wants to read them?
Yeah, give me 1 second here, sir. I'm pulling them up.
Okay.
Number 5, chairman's remarks, Chair Zay. Chair Zay addressed the committee regarding the state's attorney's previous appointment of special assistant state's attorney. Chair Zay was disappointed that concerns were raised with the state's attorney's office regarding the appointee instead of those concerns being brought directly to the chair. During a conversation with the state's attorney, it was decided that an RFP would go out for qualified firm. Policy and program manager Jason Blumenthal will work with the state's attorney's office to compile a list of questions for the scope of work due to redistricting being such a narrow field. Member Pachowski inquired as to the qualifications we are looking for. It is election law expertise, mapping expertise, or something different. Chair Zay said the preference is for an experienced firm to the unique circumstances with census members or lack thereof. Member Pachowski went on to ask if it was required to be an appointment of the state's attorney or if a qualified counsel would be sufficient. ASA Connor McCarthy replied that in order for anyone to legally advise the board, they must be a special assistant state's attorney, which is at the discretion of the state's attorney by state statute. Chair Zay disagreed, stating that in 2001, no special assistant state's attorney was appointed, nor in 2011. The board does not have the authority to hire their own counsel. Member Chaplin explained to the committee that she believed that procedure to raise a concern was to go to the state's attorney and meant no disrespect to the chair in doing so. Number 6, discussion. Redistricting consultant request for proposal. Member Ozog began the discussion by asking for clarification on the RFP process and why it is necessary since an appointment had already been made by the state's attorney. She went on to ask if it was a cost issue or an experience issue. Chair Zay stated that the payment for this process is a flat rate and an experienced firm is most important. He stressed transparency and agreement of all candidates. ASA McCarthy added that there will be a vetting process to include representatives from the state's attorney's office as well as county staff. All responses received will be forwarded to the committee for consideration. Member Ozog inquired about the timeline for the RFP. Chair Zay would like to go out by the end of the week and are working with staff to accomplish that. Staff will work with procurement to ensure the RFP is sent to qualified candidates. Members of the committee are welcome to suggest persons or firms to procurement whom they think are appropriate. GSI manager Tom Rickard was asked by Chair Zay to join the meeting. He informed the committee that the GIS department utilizes Esri mapping software, which is capable of drawing district maps across purchase of an add-on. The app utilizes PL94 data that is being released on September 30th, 2021. The ability to move lines and adjust populations within a district is part of the app. A preliminary map can be produced from that for the committee to consider. Adjustments can be made to lines and overlays, including demographics. The app has 2 different levels, basic and advanced. Mr. Ricker will send a demonstration to the committee so they can see it in action. GIS does have the fund to acquire the app. GIS also has the ACS numbers needed to draw the preliminary maps. Member to start asked Mr. Ricker for a cost of the software, both basic and advanced. Member Ozog wondered if the ACS data reference is the 2017. Mr. Ricker thinks that it is more current than that, but we'll verify and get back to the committee. Mr. Ricker also briefly explained PL 94 and how does tradition redistricting data used in map drawing. A brief discussion of when petitions can be circulated, when the map can be amended and or finalized, as well as if the candidate's filing can be moved, or filing date can be moved. ASA McCarthy could not clarify due to the unprecedented circumstances. Questions were also raised if the maps drawn with the ACS data open the county up for lawsuits. Member Chelsky asked for clarification of the state statute and whether it mandates use of the census numbers. Chair Zay urged the committee to start drawing maps and use them as a starting point. Preliminary maps could be drawn using the software and have a hired consultant affirm the maps. The committee concurred. Member Chavez asked thank the chair for his openness and ability to pivot and regroup on consulting process. Member Krajewski offered information on the process and how it changed since 2001. He inquired if the districts can be within 10% or should they be identical as the past map drawn. Chair Jay suggested that the districts be substantially close and contiguous if possible. Member Chelsky asked ASA McCarthy if 10% is statutory and if a copy of the state statute can be sent to committee members. ASA McCarthy will get a copy of the statute to committee. 5 to 10% is not statutory. It is a benchmark, but not a safe haven. Member Chelsky wondered if there is case law on this, and if so, a copy would be appreciated. GIS manager Mr. Rickard located the pricing of the software, which comes in around $4,500 per license.
Okay, thank you. Member Chavez, was there a point to that, or did you want to discuss further, or?
Well, I felt like there was a lot of procedure that was discussed and processed at the last meeting and agreed upon, and I felt like there wasn't a lot of follow through, but I'm anxious to hear kind of what your thoughts are and maybe why that was the case.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions or remarks on the minutes? Hearing none, we roll call, please.
Member Chaplin,
Aye.
Member Chavez,
Aye.
Member Krajewski, Member Ozark,
Aye.
Member Pachowski,
Aye.
Member Rutledge,
Aye.
Member Zay.
Aye.
All ayes.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move right into the redistricting consultant. Sometimes the best laid plans don't go the way you want to. Obviously, after our last meeting, I thought we had a clear path where we were going. The state's attorney started to look for consultants on his own. He was worried about the process getting out there and getting somebody he was not comfortable with. I had several discussions with him. Again, he ultimately will appoint a special state's attorney for this. And he brought forward a firm of Odelson, Stirk, Murphy, Frazier, and McGrath. I don't know this firm. I know Bert Odelson's name in the election world. It's well known. So this is who the state's attorney wants to go with. Again, I wanted to go out and get many firms. We did have member DeCiani had given a couple names. I know member Chavez had. Those were brought forward. But ultimately, in the long run, the state's attorney went out and did some work on his own and looked for some firms that do election law. And this was the firm he felt comfortable with and thought they had the experience and would be able to jump in and help us. So on that, yes, I wanted to do it RFQ. I had talked with Jason. We had worked out. I had sent him a bunch of questions and ready to go. But ultimately, this is the state's attorney's decision. Again, this firm, we will get you their qualifications and where we're going from there. I said, I don't know this firm. I don't know who they are, but the state's attorney is happy with them. He feels that their expertise is there and can do the job for us. So I'll open it up for discussion and questions. Go ahead, you got called. I can't see. I have a little picture. Is that member Chaplin?
Member Chaplin. So thank you, Chairman Zay. So when was Bert Olson's law firm decided? How long have we known that he was going to be the representation?
It hasn't been decided. He hasn't signed an engagement letter. He wanted the committee to meet first. He first told me about this late last week.
So, because, we had been emailing, asking questions about the status of what was going on, and we weren't getting answers to our questions. And I think if we would have got an answer saying, no RFQ is going out, the state's attorney is working on it, I think that would have been a better process than to keep putting us off and not answering our questions and, having us just wonder what's going on. I couldn't get an answer, so I called procurement to find out about the RFQ, the status of it. And, as a board member, I think when we ask a question, we deserve an answer and we deserve the correct answer. I just, I don't know why it was a secret that there was going to be no RFQ and the state's attorney was going to do this. I mean, why weren't we notified when we sent our emails?
I don't think it was a secret. I still had discussions with him last week. I mean, it was my intention and still was to go out for requests for qualifications. And the state's attorney, after several discussions, said that this is the firm that he felt comfortable with and thought they would do a good job. So again, I mean, it's kind of, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yes, I wanted to go out for RFQs. He went out and looked up several firms and found this firm. And that was, ultimately his decision. He would like us to concur with him after we get you all the information, who these people have represented and all their qualifications.
Just
Go ahead.
finish
Go
up
ahead.
real quick. Let me just finish up real quick. So can we send in recommendations to the state's attorney of who we want? I mean, we all had attorneys reach out to us that wanted to take, that were interested in representing us. And I know that the state's attorney, Bob Berlin, has expressed to me he wants to work with the Democrats and he didn't want 11 of us upset. Well, we're all here today because we want to make sure we get good, fair representation on this committee. So, so will he accept recommendations of other, can we send in to the state's attorney other recommendations? I mean, I know we have to get moving on this, but.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think, Member Chaplin, when you had objections to the first consultant, he asked you, who did you want? And you didn't bring any names forward.
No, I don't
If
think
you
he asked
had
me
anybody.
one.
So, I mean,
Either.
this is
I
where
don't
we're at.
remember that conversation either. That's
Not in the
not,
minutes.
that did not happen. No, on
Not
the
in the
phone,
minutes.
on the phone. It was a private conversation.
Well, that's what the state's attorney told me. I mean, it's not a private conversation. It's a conversation you and him.
Well, right.
I mean,
right.
that's,
But it's not in the minutes. No, it's not. They're saying it's not in the minutes. I said, because it was a phone call. It was a private conversation.
Right.
The conversation between Berlin and I, because somebody said it's not in the minutes. I said, no, because it wouldn't be.
no, it wasn't in the minutes. No, I mean, but again, back then, that would have been the time to, I mean,
Okay.
we need to get moving on this.
Yes, we do.
Again, I see member, I'm sorry, I can't see hands. So whoever's next, go ahead and, is it member Chavez or member Chavez?
Chavez was next.
Okay. I have the similar concerns that I want to just reiterate because I had sent several within an hour and 4 minutes of our adjournment of our last minute meeting. I sent recommendations just as we had proposed to Jason Blumenthal, copied staff. He did alert me. He got back to me quickly on that to let me know that we were still working on the RFP. But from there, every time that I tried to check in and get status updates, I was told that the state's attorney was specifically working on the process of reviewing scope of work, that we were still working toward an RFQ. Even up through May 10th, when I asked for another status update, I got a reply on the 11th that you and the state's attorney were meeting and that we will have a full update to the committee. But this has been a constant drag on, and if we're truly in a time crunch, we agreed, and that's partly why I had the minutes read, that we would have an RFQ within a week. And we now know that this did actually go through procurement. So I did give to the committee that James McGuire had, within 2.5 hours of our last meeting, had prepared the full RFQ that could have gone out with just really a brief overview and approval. So it just seems like this has been a tremendous delay for our committee in a time where we just don't have room for that. And now you've put us in a tremendous situation where I feel strong-armed into accepting an attorney that I may or may not feel comfortable with, where we were told in the minutes that this would be a committee decision, that all the candidates would be reviewed. And so for me, we've had such a diversion of the process that we agreed to.
Okay, and I agree with you, but ultimately it's the state's attorney's appointment and he had a different feeling of who he wanted to go with. And he did not want to go through the RFQ process.
Don
So-
had his hand up next.
You know,
I'm sorry,
when
Member
we
Chowska.
initially had Lukey on, so we had an issue, I thought at that time it was clarified that had to be a special assistant state's attorney. That's why I inquired about it. And if it is the state's attorney's pick, then I don't know why we submitted names and that they weren't well received. But if we're looking for a quick response, why don't we get Bert Odelson to come to our committee, have him present his credentials, and we could go from there rather than going back to first base again. So I think the state's attorney's made a special assistant appointment. I know of this gentleman and how qualified he is, but it just seems to me that the RFQ, maybe wasn't worded properly because we don't have the authority for that. And if we're going to have a committee and the state's attorney is going to have somebody presented, then before we engage him, I'd like this committee to talk to him and see what his credentials are, that everybody's comfortable with him, rather than going backwards and let's now throw all these attorneys back into the mix when it really isn't our call. I think we should have advice and consent on the state's attorney's pick. And that's why I'm saying, why don't we just move forward to have Bert Odelson at our next meeting? And then if we have questions about how he's going to do it or what procedure or any other question, we resolve it at that time rather than taking a step back.
Okay, I'm sorry, is that Member Ozon?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Zay. In the minutes, Mr. Zay stressed transparency and agreement on all candidates. Already, I'm very uncomfortable with the fact that we did not have transparency about what was going on here. We are almost exactly a month from our last meeting on April 20th. And we discussed an RFQ, and I find it difficult to accept that we were not told that there would not be an RFQ much earlier than today's meeting. And if we're going to talk about transparency, this is really difficult. And we'd already discussed why we wanted Mr. Lukenhans to not represent us, and here we are. So open and transparency seems to already have been sent out the window.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry, Member Chavez?
I just have one final one. My biggest concern is I have looked over some of our code, and I honestly don't feel like the intent of the state's attorney choosing someone is to actually circumvent our committee. I can't imagine that the intent of the code is to give him full power to choose someone. When I have had this looked at by other legal experts, another possible interpretation is that the committee makes a recommendation, and of course the state's attorney reviews the contract, because that's what they're an expert in, to finalize the decision that has been made by the committee. But if this is truly how we are interpreting this code, I honestly think we are interpreting it wrong, because it doesn't make sense for state's attorney to choose someone and then be able to have full power to make this all happen. It really lessens every voting member's power on the board.
I'll just actually, Mr. Zay, may I be recognized?
Yes, I was going to call on you, State's Attorney McCarthy.
The weight of prevailing case law and authority concurs with our office's sole and exclusive power to represent the board, and our office's sole and exclusive power to determine who represents the board. I would be curious to see who gave you the legal opinion the contrary, because that, I believe, is against the weight of authority, and also the weight of, I even think there may be an attorney general opinion. Don't quote me on that, but I'm fairly sure it's there. The state's attorney is the sole and exclusive representative of the county and the county board. There's two ways that someone other than the state's attorney can do it. One is if the court appoints someone because there's a conflict. The other is if the state's attorney appoints a special assistant state's attorney. That's clearly spelled out in the county's code. And I'm not aware of any evidence or any rules or interpretations to the contrary.
Can I just finish and then you're next? So I understand that that's an interpretation. I do feel like this redistricting committee is a unique situation where no matter how you want to slice it and dice it, we could potentially be dealing with partisan issues. And so I think that this is a potential conflict as well, that we need to have someone that is agreed upon. We have a bipartisan group here. I think we can come to agreement, but I don't think that power should rest solely with the state's attorney.
And I would just point out, I think that's an issue that you should take up with the state legislature, because the law is very clear on that.
Okay, Member Ozon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to clarify something from the minutes here. ASA Connor McCarthy replied that in order for anyone to legally advise the board, they must be a special assistant state's attorney, which is the discretion of the state's attorney by state statute. Chair Zay disagreed, stating that in 2001, no special assistant state's attorney was appointed, nor in 2011. The board does not have the authority to hire their own counsel. Now, it seems contradictory that in 2001 and 2011, they did not have a specially appointed attorney representing the discussions of this committee. So who did that? And I assume there was somebody. So how did that occur? And I think that unless the statute has changed, that there seems to be a major discrepancy here in who is representing or how the representation is chosen.
My understanding, having not been here in 2011 or in 2001, in fact, I was in grammar school in 2001. I will say my understanding of how it worked is Mr. Luke-Hounds was brought in as a consultant to draw the maps, and that an ASA from our office had the necessary expertise to advise on the legality of those topics. But
So why can't that be done again?
Right, but can we not hire a consultant?
I don't have the necessary understanding of the law in this area to advise you, and I don't believe there's anyone in our office with that expertise. That's why in this particular instance,
Well,
we need someone to do that.
we were actually told that that kind of guidance would be given to us on April 20th, I believe.
I'm looking here and I'm not entirely sure.
Here we've got, hang on just a minute here. Maps, one other thing here. Timeline for the RFP, Chair Zay said he'd like to go up by the end of the week, working with staff. Staff will work with procurement. Members of the committee are welcome to suggest persons or firms to procurement who they think are appropriate. And so that would appear to mirror the situation in 2001 and 2011, which Mr. Zay said was the situation. So apparently the committee at that time decided on Mr. Lukenhans, and the state's attorney reviewed their decisions. So that would seem to me that we are able to choose our own counsel.
That's not council member Ozog. The issue there is Mr. Luke-Hounds drew maps. You want to draw a map, you don't need a legal degree to draw a map. But to inform and advise the committee as to whether or not that map is legal, meets the requirements of statute, meets the Voting Rights Act, that requires specialized legal information, expertise,
Okay.
and is necessarily rendering a legal opinion. That's something that you respectfully, the board can't go out for an RFP on or can't hire a consultant on. That can only be from a special assistant state's attorney or an assistant state's attorney. In the past, we had an assistant state's attorney that could do that type of work and understood that. Unfortunately, he has since retired from our office, and we don't have anyone that can do that type of work.
But I'm still not clear because it looks like Mr. Lukenhans is the one who was drawing the map. So he was acting as a consultant who was hired by the committee. So why can we not hire a consultant to do the map first, and then your office or whoever Mr. Berlin would appoint would then be able to review what maps had been drawn and the rationale behind them?
And well, we don't, first of all, we don't have anyone on staff, as I've said 3 or 4 times. That
But
has
Mr.
that-
Lukenhans wasn't on staff.
Excuse me, Member Ozog. And second, we also don't have, I think you're running out of time, quite frankly. I don't know that there's going to be time for you to do an RFP for a consultant, find a consultant, have the consultant draw the maps, have someone look at those maps to make sure they're valid, and still have them enacted by the end of June. If we had done this, I don't know, we hired Mr. Lukenhans back in March, maybe? I'd have to look at the maybe February even. If we had gotten a head start, perhaps there would have been time to do a 2-track system with a consultant that only draws maps and an attorney that only reviews the legality of those maps. I was actually of the opinion from your minutes that the committee was going to start using maps with GIS and other things, and then that person we were going to bring in was going to consult on that. So I think there's been some communication with the use of the word consultant, meaning one thing to some people, consultant meaning another thing to another set of people, and consultant meaning yet a third thing to a third group of people that all agree that a consultant may be appropriate, but no one quite is using the same yardstick to measure what that consultant is or does.
Well, I think I can clearly, at least speak for myself, that is not an expertise that I have. And I don't believe anyone else at this table, especially us newer members, have that expertise. So I think a consultant would be necessary. And we can't go to the GIS and decide individually or however without a consultant to guide us. So I think that we've got 6 weeks, and we really needed to know about this situation 3 weeks ago,
Yes,
that we were
we
not
did.
going to have an RFP
Yep.
for a specially appointed state's attorney,
RFQ.
or excuse me, RFQ.
Yeah, RFQ, and it's.
So I
And
think
it's
we
ready to
need a
go.
consultant, and it should be a consultant, if we want to use that term, that is chosen by the committee, and we do an RFP, and we really move on this. We have an RFP out by the end of the week. We have a decision made,
Yep.
and we get this done.
Member Chaplin?
Thank you, Chair Zay. So, and if I'm looking at the RFQ, and it says DuPage County is searching for a qualified professional firm consultant to provide attorney services for the legislative redistricting project, and they have to have a license to practice law. So it's, it's a lawyer that is a consultant to help us draw the map. I mean, if this was easy to do, we could just sit here and draw the map ourselves without a consultant, but none of us are masters at map drawing, and you've had them before when you've drawn maps, and we're behind the 8 ball now by at least 3 weeks, and I think we've put this out, and let's see what we get. Put it out today. It's ready to go. Jim McGuire can put this out immediately. Put it out, get them in by the end of the week. We call a special call next Tuesday, and we get this done.
Just before the committee acts, I'd like the opportunity to consult with the state's attorney on that, because my concern is, again, that RFP seeks legal services.
Right.
And I believe that's a major issue for the state's attorney.
Then how was
Okay.
Mr. Lukenhans hired?
Right.
In 2011?
As I said, I'm not entirely sure how they came to hire him in 2011. I wasn't here. My understanding is Mr. Lukenhans drew maps. Our office reviewed those maps for their legality, and it was a map drawing expertise versus these are the maps and they're lawful and they make sense. Now, I want to caution the committee. It's one thing for someone to come in and draw a map, but if the committee's inquiries to that individual are going to be, can I move this line here? That the answer that that person can only give you is, I can physically move that line there, but it can't touch upon whether or not that line is, I hate to say lawful, but whether that line and the map is drawn meets the requirements of the code. That enters into legal advice. And that's where we run into those problems. So I think that's one of the reasons that that Mr. Odelson can do both, meaning that instead of having to have someone say, can you move this line here? Mr. State's Attorney, can you look at these and say if this line moved here makes these maps unlawful? That it's better to have someone that can do both.
Okay. If I can, I might need to get to Member Desart and Member Renahan. They've been patiently sitting there. Member Desart.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering, this was on the agenda for today, and I think if this is the sole decision of the state's attorney, I think the state's attorney should be here today to answer the questions as to why. It's been suggested that Bert Odelson be in here to talk about his qualifications, but we need to talk to the state's attorney, the guy who's deciding who this committee is using as the representative. And I think that would be respectful for the state's attorney to be here and speak before this committee and tell us his reasoning for choosing this individual. The previous individual, this Lukenhauser, had to be dismissed due to the word escaped me. The conflict of interest. Thank you so much. Yes, he had to be dismissed. So we cannot use him this time, but the state's attorney should be here to tell this committee why he chose Odelson and what he was looking at and why he didn't consider any of the other attorneys who were recommended by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Renahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee, for all the work that you're doing. This is so important. My question is, and I think this is something that this should be findable in a minute. What is the statutory authority that the choice is the state's attorney? Because I think Member Chavez makes an excellent point. There's a difference between a choice, which has to do with the thinking behind why we might pick someone, and the technicality, the procedural moment of appointment. Now, to me, those are two very different things. And really to totally disregard what would be the majority probably decision of this committee whether it be, and I don't think there's anybody, preordained or, anything like that. But to just totally disregard what this committee might come up with, I think is just totally turning this upside down. And I think we're better than that. So I would just like to see a more fair process. I'm disappointed that some of those questions were not asked or not answered from what were told to us in the minutes, because those answers should have been provided the day of.
And I can actually answer Member Renahan's request for the citation. It's 55 ILCS 5/4-2003B. It says the state's attorney may appoint qualified attorneys to assist as special assistant state's attorneys when the public interest so requires.
Okay, and again, to my point, there is a difference from an appointment and a substantive selection. So let's find some case law on that one.
Okay, who do I have here? Is that Member Chaplin?
Yeah, and Member Ozak go because she's been before me, and then I'll go.
You know, again, with all due respect, State's Attorney McCarthy, we had asked about what exactly we're supposed to be doing here. Chair Zay, from our minutes on the 20th, suggested that the districts be substantially close and contiguous as possible. Member Pacharski asked Attorney McCarthy if 10% is statutory and if a copy of the state statute could be sent to the committee members. Again, another critical piece of information that we don't have. And again, I'd just like to reiterate what we need here is a consultant, which I do believe we should be able to choose. We don't really need an attorney because whatever the consultant would help us decide in terms of the map would then be reviewed by either your office or a person who has been hired by the a special state's attorney.
Okay, Member Chaplin.
Thank you so much. And when are we going to get the credentials of Oldison? Because we don't have them now. So are we going to have to wait another 4 weeks to get? I mean,
No, we can.
In our packet, quite frankly.
We can send those to you today. I'll talk to State's Attorney. And I agree with you. If it's okay with the committee, I know we can belabor this. Why don't we have a special call this week and have the State's Attorney there? And if he feels that we need to have Mr. Odelson in, have Mr. Odelson there also.
Have him in anyway.
Yes.
Let's, I
Well, I mean,
would like
that's
to
fine.
have
I mean,
Odelson
that's-
brought in anyway, because if that's the recommendation, let's not go a second step, because now we determine that it is the state's attorney's sole and exclusive power. Bert Odelson should be here and he can tell us his credentials. And if he has any questions as to anybody, as to whether he's capable or for whatever reason they have a question on, let's see what we can multitask. We do two things at one time, but I think that's reasonable to move forward. Let's not go backwards. And if people don't want Odelson for the reason, then let's express it. But let's have him here because that's the selection. Let's have, if the state's attorney needs to hone in it, let's move forward and let's do both. And then we can go from there.
I agree. I'm sorry, is that Member Ozog?
But to reiterate, we need to see his CV today. This has really gone too far. We need to see who he's represented and what he's done. And before we even bring him in or whenever we might have a special call, we should have been told this at least a week ago.
Okay. Okay, Member Chavez.
Well, and what if we get him to the table and we're not happy with his qualifications, his credentials? We don't know if we don't maybe consider him to be a fair choice. I don't know what the concerns may be because we don't know anything about him, but I do think several of us have submitted other names and I don't know why they can't be included in consideration so that we're not just looking at one individual. You would never bring one individual in for a job interview because you want to have comparison. You want to know how many redistricting have you done? We went through the qualifications. Again, they're in the minutes. So why are we just bringing in one person because state's attorney said, when there really are a lot of qualified people in our surrounding area that may be better? The committee may be able to say to state's attorney, we believe this is a better choice because of X, Y, Z.
Okay, well, I mean, I will disagree. I don't think there are many people here. This is a unique redistricting that people do, drawing maps. Not a lot of people do this. Not a lot of people do election law. So,
I disagree with you, Chairman Day. I presented two people who have gone through, one gentleman that I presented that I wish had made it to the committee 4 weeks ago. I submitted it within an hour and 4 minutes of our last meeting. And he has done the last 4 redistricting, 10-year redistricting, over 40 years of experience. I can't imagine that there's much more than that. So we brought to the table highly qualified individuals.
Okay, member
Just
Chaplin?
one last comment. Yeah, and and I had two attorneys that, I kept saying, wait for the RFQ, wait for the RFQ, wait for the RFQ. And then I tell them, oh, there's no RFQ. And so, it just, the whole process really just, it's very troubling and it's really upsetting.
And it undermines us as a board and as professionals and as representatives of our district, because that was part of our word. We were told an RFQ was coming. I have multiple follow-up emails. It's very frustrating.
Okay, we'll have the state's attorney here to discuss it then. And then we'll get the qualifications out.
Don't we want to have Olson here or not?
Right, no, we will.
Okay.
We will. I can't see, member Rutledge?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just curious if you were a part of the discussion with our state's attorney when this name surfaced, and where you were aware of that process.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
I don't know these people. I don't. The state's attorney sent me his qualifications the other day. I don't know him. He's represented Cook County, the Cook County Board. He's been parliamentarian, special counsel. He's done redistricting for the city of Chicago. So this sounds more honestly like a Democratic firm than it does a Republican firm. So I can tell you that. When he represented the African American caucus for the city of Chicago, that's probably not in our wheelhouse, as we would say. So I was not part of that process. And as I said, I do not know this person. I know the name Bert Olson just through election law, but I've never met him. He could walk in the room, I wouldn't know who he was.
What's happening at the table here is there's a lot of murmuring about why you have that information and you've had it for a few days, you just said, and the whole committee doesn't have any of that.
That's why we're going to discuss it today and get you all the information.
It should have
Nothing's
been in
been,
our packet.
the state's-
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, it should have been in our packet.
because I asked the state's attorney, has he signed an engagement letter? He said, no, he has not engaged them yet. So that's why we brought his name up today. Okay, member Ozog?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to know what the committee's thoughts are on an RFQ for a consultant. And obviously, they may need to have legal background, obviously, but to hire a consultant who can help us draw a map. Because that's what happened in 2001 and 2011. And I assume, and Mr. Zay, you were here, that the committee hired the consultant. And then whatever the consultant decided was reviewed by the state's attorney. So thus you are hiring a consultant, not an attorney. So that takes care of the clause where it says that the board does not have the authority to hire their own counsel. But I believe we do have the authority to hire our own consultant. And what we need here is a consultant who's familiar with GIS systems and how you do this. And this is a pretty complicated, I've got background in census, et cetera. This is complicated and it's not in any of our experience. So we need somebody with experience to help us draw the map. And also we're not really reinventing the wheel on this map. It will be fundamentally, I assume it will look like 6 districts. It will be fundamentally the same. We need someone who has expertise with population. How do you decide what's changed? And we already have problems with our statistics, but that's what I believe we need. And we can do this RFQ very quickly and have a meeting perhaps next Tuesday and decide on who we would like to have consult with us. And then that is done within a 10 to 14 day period. Then we have a map and then we are able to move forward. And if we have to meet by special call every week until the end of June, that's what we need to do. But we've lost 3 weeks here.
Yep.
And quite frankly, I know several, sorry, I wasn't recognized, so I apologize.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
But I do know of several counties that are meeting up to 3 times a week. And I do think, I completely concur with member Ozog. I do think that what I have found in vetting out candidates from a legal standpoint is that we should also be vetting out candidates that specifically handle maps and political maps. And there are experts in this area. I think one of the concerns that I had after leaving our last meeting is that we were considering purchasing software that we're not familiar with and doing this in-house. And I think the conclusion that I have come to after doing a lot of research since our last meeting, is that's really not the best option. To Member Ozog's point, this is such a specialty and this is such an important remapping that I think we do need to consider a true consultant in this area.
Well, my concern was, I think, is we'll have the state's attorney then come in and explain. And that RFQ, I think in that first sentence when it was read, said it had to be a lawyer, I think.
Yeah, it does say that.
Well, then here we go back to the legal circle where the state's attorney has that authority. So, I mean, we can sit here and fight the state's attorney if we want, or do we want to move forward and do a map? We've already had to delay because some members felt like the other consultant had a conflict, which I do have to say I didn't agree with. And in the meantime, King County has hired that same consultant. The Democrats at King County, since they control the board and the state's attorney there, have hired that consultant to do their map for them. So, you know, do we want to continue to kick this down the road, or do we want to have the state's attorney and Mr. Odelson come in and explain their expertise this week? Member Ozog.
Thank you. This RFQ can be changed to simply ask for a person with a demographer with election expertise. And then it's not hiring a lawyer. And we can assume that there will certainly be people with legal expertise in how this is done. But we just changed the wording. We are hiring a demographer. That's what we need. We need someone who is familiar with how the population has changed, et cetera, and come up with an even distribution of population, which is the crux of what we're doing. Although, again, we don't really know what the statute requires in terms of the 10%, or must it be exactly equal? We need that information first, but I think we just need a demographer. Hire a demographer with election expertise, and you will, I assume, get legal, they'll have legal expertise as well. But then it goes to review to the state's attorney, or whoever the state's attorney may want to appoint for the legal review of what we've decided on.
And so, Member Zay, may I be recognized?
Well, I just remember Pachowski first, and then
I think, again, why don't we give Bert Orgelson at least a little time to make a presentation to the board if that's who was picked, and then we can go from there. Because I think if it is the state's attorney's pick, and this guy has the qualifications, and he clearly demonstrates that, then I think we're going to be moving forward, not backwards. Because yes, we are losing time, but Bert Orgelson, in my opinion, probably is one of the premier election attorneys. I don't know him personally, does a lot of, I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat, but if that's the person who was selected, are we disregarding his selection right now, just unilaterally, or to give him an opportunity to present why he should be retained by this committee?
Well, we don't know anything about it.
Let's bring him in.
member, State's Attorney McCarthy.
My only concern with how Member Ozog phrased it was that it seems like Member Ozog would like this person to come up with what I'll call a draft map for the committee. And my concern there is there are certain things like population that are governed by case law, but there are also, and that you're not supposed to divide except as required municipalities, township, precincts, that sort of thing. But there's also the concern that I think, and I wasn't here, my understanding is that in the past, there was involvement and direction. You started with the original map, and then things were done by the different members, or were suggested by the different members of the consultant to make the maps either equal in population or to make modifications to them. My concern is by going, and I haven't spoken to the state's attorney about this, I'm not sure what his position is, but this is just from hearing that statement, and my off-the-cuff concern is that the state's attorney may consider being told, go draw us a map that is that meets these requirements of statute to be a legal advice side of things, because they're using their interpretation and their understanding of what the statute is to generate a map that they feel is, again, in conformity with the law. And I want to check with the state's attorney before I venture too farther afield on that, but that's just a concern that I can identify based on what the discussion I've heard.
Member Renahan. And there is a 10-question limit, Member Ozog. No, just kidding.
I'm just wondering, is there any opportunity I think one of the issues is I think this committee is not feeling heard, and I'm not on the committee, but this is what I'm gathering. The committee's not feeling heard in terms of who they have put up. For example, Member Chavez has come up with a couple people, it sounds like immediately after the meeting you just had. I mean, can the state's attorney consider these people, interview these people? Has he even seen what they have to offer? I'm just, just trying to think how we can go forward, but also how we can give, due consideration to, I mean, these are elected members from our districts, and I would hate for one countywide elected official to basically supersede. We have representatives from every district on this committee. Just, what can we do?
Member Rozak?
With all due respect again, Mr. McCarthy, I think we're splitting hairs here because, if they may advise it would have been helpful to find out what the actual statute is before today's meeting, which was promised to us on the 20th of April. Is it 10%? Do we have leeway between population for each of the districts? We need those guidelines, obviously, which we don't have. And yes, should they decide to tell us X, Y, and Z must be followed as we're going through this map, that's still consultant information. It's not legal information. It's when the map is made and submitted to the state's attorney's office that we are now heading into, this will be our legal map that we're submitting. So I still think we have time and we can do an RFQ. These firms are out there and I'm sure they're used to working very nimbly because we're all under a time constraint. And once they're in the system, once they have the GIS information as best we have, we're not turning it into 12 districts or we're not reinventing the wheel completely, but that gives us a baseline to start from. And should they have legal expertise, they will be able to tell us about this 10% population, et cetera.
If I can briefly, members, I hate to.
Yes.
With regards to the statute, it's not just the statute. Statute language is the base, is the base for that, but then you have hundreds of cases that interpret what reasonably proportionate means. So you have a case, I believe, I think it was a North Carolina case, I know it was a federal case, that says, they're using 18% deviation that says, well, just because it's under 18% doesn't mean that it's not still violative of the Voting Rights Act. There's a lot of, the minutia and the details on this type of law is manifold. And that's why people basically specialize in just this type of work, because there is such a huge amount of minutia and specialization in the law. And there's frankly deviations based on federal court areas and different controlling precedent. And I don't really have grounds to review the minutes. My concern was, I do remember Member Pachalski asking me for copies of statutes and cases. And I believe Member Pachalski, I sent you those.
Yes.
But I don't know if the committee ever asked me to send it to anybody. And if that's the case, I'm happy. The minutes say that. I was at the meeting. I don't remember if that was directed that the committee wanted it or if it was just Member Pachalski who asked to see it. But I'm happy to send that out, at least some of the stuff that I have.
Okay. And again, all fairness to the state's attorney McCarthy, I mean, I guess a lot of these questions that have to be answered by the state's attorney himself. He's the one that had made this decision, and had talked to these firms and had talked to, I guess, several firms. But again, we should get his input on this. Is that Member Ozog?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, with all due respect, it seems to me that we're putting the cart before the horse. We can't even have any legal analysis unless we have a map. And that's why I believe we need an RFQ for a consultant so that a map can be, at least a draft map can be formed as quickly as possible. And then it can go through legal review with all of the statutes that Mr. McCarthy is citing.
Okay. Member Rutledge?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask Member Ozog if she's making that specific motion for us to vote on here.
I am making a motion that we put an RFQ together and that we follow guidelines in this, and we look for a demographic consultant with election expertise to give us a draft map, and we work with extreme expediency, whatever we decide. An RFQ by the end of the week, perhaps, and maybe by next Thursday, we have our next Wednesday, we have a list of names and we hire somebody and we get going on this.
We need to see the RFQ before we vote on it,
Well,
though.
we have to, we basically have it. We just have to change the title. I mean, just change it to, I mean, you could just simply say DuPage County is searching for a qualified professional firm consultant to provide services for the redistricting project following the 2020 census results. And then you can take out, you don't need that must be licensed to practice law. I mean, you know,
We won't be hiring somebody with no experience for sure.
well, right, because, and then they ask for your qualifications right here. But the point is, it's very important that we have a good qualified consultant, because as we know, all of these counties are hiring consultants. And if it was so simple to just have a GIS program and draw the map, none of these other counties would be hiring consultants. So, you know, like I said, I think the sooner we get this RFQ out, the better we are. Let's get it done. You know, if we want to bring in Oldeston and then some others, you know, let's have 2 or 3 before the committee when they fill out the RFQ. And let's have them come before the committee and let's get this done and let's get moving. And if we have to meet 4 times a week to get this done, we're going to have to do it. But it, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we should have been notified that there was not going to be an RFQ. And to ask those questions and to not get the answers is extremely, extremely frustrating. That's not allowing us to do our job. It's putting a roadblock in the way of doing our job. And I've had that experience once before and it didn't turn out very well. So let's make sure that when a board member asks a question, that is answered honestly.
Okay. Is it Member Chavez?
I just want to put in my 2 cents on the timing on this, because clearly this last RFQ was completely completed within 2 hours of our last meeting. I honestly think these changes could be made by 5 o'clock tonight and could go out first thing tomorrow morning. I think we could realistically give everyone until Monday to reply. It's going to be an incredibly fast turnaround for our vendor or consultant, but I think it's doable. And unfortunately, that's the time constraints we're under now. So I think a Monday response for proposal, and we reconvene possibly even as soon as Tuesday to evaluate who has come in. But I think unfortunately, I completely concur with Member Chavez that, Member Chaplin, the Member Chaplin, that, you know, we were put into this situation and we should have been notified much sooner if this RFQ was going to get canceled.
I'll second Member Ozar's motion.
Oh, I did.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Liz. So sorry.
It's not on the agenda. My concern is if there's a sense of the committee to send staff out to do an RFP.
We did it last time. We did it. It was on the last agenda to put it out and they put it together. So come on.
I think I just want to be clear, you're not taking a formal action to hire a consultant or decide that you're going to hire a consultant. You're asking staff to put out an RFP. That's what your motion is. Am I understanding?
Yes, RFQ.
Good. I just want to make that very clear for the minutes and for the record.
And we also
Is
need,
that a proper motion, though, if it's up for discussion only? I don't care it is, but I just would be consistent.
I mean, this isn't taking a final action. It's
All right.
my understanding is that they're moving to basically direct staff to go create an RFP and put it on the street so we can obtain a series of potential responses.
and we also need to add dates to this. It would be an RFQ.
RFQ. It's an RFQ.
Yes,
And we
so
need to put dates on this. I believe Member Chavez said that it would be issued tomorrow.
Update tonight, and then have it go out first thing in the morning. And then responses due on Monday.
Monday is Memorial Day.
No, this one.
Oh, this.
Oh, no.
No,
The
that's
31st.
fine.
Sorry, okay. Responses due 5/24.
Yes, and
And
then
then-
we will review on 5/25 would be my recommendation. I think we're stuck with that timeline. It stinks, but we shouldn't be here.
One, Chair Zay, Jason
Yes.
Blumenthal, can I have one comment?
Sure.
Do you guys mind if I real quick check? I don't know if our current policy for RFQs is 14 days. I don't want to be wrong on that. Can I go talk to Jim McGuire real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is this a alleviate us bringing Berlin here? Are we still gonna do that? Because we previously agreed to have Berlin and Olson here at the
He should
next
come
meeting.
in.
I think so.
There's a sex assault jury going on right now that he's.
Okay, he can come in, okay.
So Connor, the state's attorney would not be able to come at some point?
Today, right now, he's not available.
No,
At our
sometime
next,
this week.
Sometime this week.
I can see what his calendar is. I don't have a copy of his calendar on me or with me or available.
Well, and one point that I don't think was answered that Member Renahan brought to the table was the fact that we're not being heard, our candidates are not being brought to the table. Is that something that we can realistically chat through? I don't know, because if we're bringing, are we bringing in old, I don't know where we stand with bringing him in.
I don't know. I
I'm
thought
confused.
Berlin and Olson were coming in at our next meeting from what we discussed earlier. I just want to know where we're going because I don't want any confusion
Right.
as to what we're doing because we decided something earlier or as a consensus to do something, or now we've decided to do something different. We're doing both together. I don't know.
Member Ozog?
I believe at this point, we're postponing talking to Mr. Berlin and Mr. Olson, because what we would like to do is have a consultant first so that we can do the math. And then should Mr. Berlin choose to have Mr. Olson, then that can be a separate discussion a week or so down the road, once, or let's say 2 weeks down the road, once we have some format of a draft in place of a draft map.
So we want to hire 2 people instead of 1.
Well, I'm not sure if it's really necessary to hire an attorney for the state's attorney's office, unless, as Mr. McCarthy said, there's no one with that expertise. But yes, that's exactly what I want to do. We need a demographer so we can at least do a draft map. And then after that, we can go forward and we can go through legal review and have this done by the end of June.
Connor, doesn't the state's attorney have to review this and make sure it's legal, I guess, as any RFQ?
We're gonna have to take a look at the RFQ when we get what it says, because a lot of the RFQ that was, I actually don't have a copy in front of me. I was given a copy, but thank you, Mike. My recollection on this is, it asks about litigation services. It asks about, I want to say,
It does on number 11.
11.
11, I was gonna say, yeah, the redistricting litigation. And there's some stuff in here that would obviously be non-applicable to any, I guess, we'll use demographer. Because I guess they wouldn't really be involved in litigation.
Right.
They were, I guess, if they were probably operating in a combined role of attorney and map drawer.
You can remove a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take a look at some of these and make sure that the state's attorney's okay with it.
None of the rest of them appear to be having legal scope.
Is there an objection to having him look it over and get back to everybody within the next day or 2?
I just want to go, like I said, the state's attorney's in the sex assault jury right now, and I want to make sure that he is in the.
Would you mind if we changed it to the 20th for the RFQ?
Why can't we have the state's
Change the
attorney give us
20th.
opinion as to the RFQ for a consultant? And if there's anything else Bob would like to bring out, having heard everybody's, I don't know if you want to call them issues, how the process was, so we can correct and don't go through this a second time.
Well,
I think the state's attorney already reviewed what we're proposing, that's all.
Well, I mean, can we do that before we go out for the RFQ or no? Have the state's attorney come in and give his opinion and then send, he has the information on Mr. Olson, send it to everybody first? Member Garcia?
I just wanted to see what Jason found out from Jim McGuire.
Yeah, thank you, Member Garcia. Yes, I talked to Jim McGuire, that is possible. I just wanted to confirm. If, say it were to go out tomorrow for Monday. So-
That's okay?
Well, yeah, regardless if we change the schedule, I imagine we can play with that.
Okay.
Okay. Member Ozog?
okay, thank you, Mr. Zay, Member Zay, Chairman Zay. Again,
I answered all of them.
I answered it, yeah. I'm gonna bring up your own words again.
And a few
In
others.
2001, no special state's attorney was appointed, or into 11. And in that case, I assume that Mr. Lucathans was basically hired as a consultant. And it says right here that according to you, that there was no special assistant state's attorney appointed. So I would prefer to have this RFQ sent out. I don't believe we need Mr. Berlin's review. And we need to do this now so that we have a map. That is the critical thing we need to leave here with today. A path forward to getting a map drawn. After that, we can deal with any kind of legal review, et cetera. But there's two, to me, there is very clearly two separate processes here that we need to deal with.
But again, I think as State's Attorney McCarthy had said, they had somebody at the State's Attorney's office that could review this. They don't have anybody to do that now.
But we don't need a review. This is a consultant. It's not for an attorney.
Well, he reviewed for a while, right?
Review the map. Well, and maybe it's, if I can interject, I think it might be a
Yeah.
process where we get this mapping drawn. I do think most counties are hiring the mapping consultant in conjunction with the attorney, but it may be that, I think what I'm getting from our committee is that we're most comfortable starting with the maps because we're not necessarily feeling comfortable with this state's attorney appointment. And that might give us some more time then to vet out other possibilities for legal advice. But at least then we are at least starting with a mapping consultant and we're getting this ball rolling.
Okay, I mean, I think we are actually running out of time, but, do what the committee wants to do, so. But do we still want to have the State's Attorney to come in and give his opinion on the process?
I don't know if we need that.
No, not at this time.
No.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make this motion again, or
okay.
clean it up. Okay, I'd like to move that the committee approves.
It's not a final action. My understanding is that this is just you directing staff to go put an RFP out. I don't even think that there needs to be a formal motion.
And then we'll approve the
My thought
RFP
is-
at the next meeting, a formal RFP at the next meeting.
Exactly. My understanding is that you'd like staff to,
We'd like to
We
approve
can't
it
do
today.
another meeting.
We
We
can't
don't
do,
have
we
time.
need this put out. We do.
my understanding is that you want to direct staff to put out an RFP and return with candidates responsive to that RFP at the next.
It's an
meeting.
RFQ.
Sorry.
And when he says P, it means Q. Okay, so it's not
Sorry.
Okay, that's what we want to
I
do.
don't know that it's confused.
That's what we
So-
want to do.
That's what you want to do. So is there, I guess, I don't think there needs to be a formal vote on it. I would just ask, is there anyone that disagrees with that at the committee?
I would still like to
I would like a motion.
I would still like
Let's
to
make a
have,
motion to do it.
I don't know if we can, if it's not an agenda. item.
Okay, we can't,
You
okay.
can direct staff to put it together and then we'll vote it next time it's up. I would still like to get the state's attorney here. If there's issues with how something was done, let's clear it up and then go from there. But, whatever.
I think the consensus is that we want two separate consultants, a consultant and an attorney.
Yeah, I agree.
And what we'd like to do today is direct staff to do an RFQ, and what I'd like to do is read out what we would do, and then we can have a voice vote, whatever the chairman feels is appropriate to express our agreement with putting this RFQ out.
But they can be the same firm. You're looking for two. It could be one firm that does both, right?
Might be.
Could be.
It might be.
one, right.
But this is what we'd like to do here today. So,
So does staff understand that that's what the direction of the
So,
committee is?
yeah, if I may, just I want to reiterate my understanding. So based off the draft RFQ that was already done, we would get rid of the word attorney at the first line, get rid of the second line, or sorry, it might be different when it's printed. I'm looking at my email, I apologize. The second sentence being counsel must be licensed to practice law.
right,
We get rid of number 11.
correct.
That would be the RFQ that we are looking to have issued, and we're looking at a timeline for it to go out either this evening or tomorrow morning until Monday. Is that, now Monday, am I putting it noon, or should I just let Jim McGuire tell me what the best option is on that
Jim,
one?
maybe.
I'll talk to Jim about that.
5 PM would give them another business.
Okay,
day.
that's fine. I wanted to make sure that,
Okay,
No, I mean, then it doesn't give us time to review it if we wanted to have a meeting on Tuesday.
Right.
yeah.
I mean, I would put noon by,
Maybe noon is a better.
noon.
The only addition I would propose so that we don't run into the initial problem that we had with Luca Hans is we specifically say, are you currently, what's the best way to word this? Are you currently in litigation with the county in any pending cases? Something to that degree, because that was our concern with the initial, that should have been vetted, in my opinion, and brought to our attention then. So let's go ahead and just put it into this, so we clear that off the table.
Then we gotta clarify, because pending cases, you're speaking.
Their lawyer.
Yeah.
No, don't, I wouldn't put it in
Don't do
there.
that?
No.
Okay.
I think, I don't know how you could word it. but it
No.
wouldn't be an issue.
Okay,
No, don't.
okay, all right.
Or we
that's
could
good.
ask that question when they,
Okay.
candidates
Yeah,
come
we
All
in.
right,
want to
that's
have
better advice.
that's
Okay,
true.
I withdraw that then.
Okay, so I think we're clear on what we'd like to have, and then we're looking at a response of by noon on the 24th of May.
Yeah.
And a special call on Tuesday, the 25th. Mr. Chairman, whatever
Want
time
to
you
name a
feel.
time?
It's county.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we'll figure out, we'll have to
Yeah.
look at, we'll have to see what the schedule is for that day, obviously.
We make it in the afternoon. 'cause
Right,
we
we
have
can-
Have to be afternoon.
at least an hour every time, I think.
Beautiful.
With our trash, our jumpsuits.
Yes, I believe legislative will be meeting on Tuesdays too, so I'll work with
Okay,
both those parties and get times, if that's okay with the
that's
committee.
great. Yep,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay,
Okay,
so we're clear with everything for the RFQ.
Moving along.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
what?
We're good with everything?
I'm good with that. Member
Okay,
Rosa.
thank you.
If that's, what I said was correct, then yes, that's my
Okay.
understanding of what you guys are looking
And
for.
whenever emails are sent, why don't we do them to everybody on the committee? Because if somebody didn't get stuff and somebody got something, I know that
Yes.
would kind of be an issue. So let's make sure it's all inclusive and we're open and transparent, that everybody gets a copy, whatever, anything sent out, whether it's requested or not.
Just don't respond all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll try to ensure ECC.
okay. Did we want to go move on to county board district maps? Jason, you had talked with our GIS on this?
Yeah, Mr. Ricker is actually in the room with us as well. Tom, ever briefly, if you want to just say kind of where you've been looking at data from and what our capabilities are here and what we've been able to do so far, and if that's the will of the committee, we can go down that route or whatnot.
Yeah, like I said before, the PL 94 data, which is needed, won't be totally ready until September 30th. They do have what they call a legacy format summary redistricting that will be available in August. They've got a prototype that's out there. I haven't downloaded it yet to see what it is. What it sounds like, that the format of the data is in the old format, but it may be some new numbers. I don't know until I download that to see what data is available. The application that we've been testing is very efficient. Basically, you plug in how many districts you want, it sees the total population, divides it, and then all you do is on the map is you pick the various polygons of census tracts and census block, and it starts dividing those populations up into each district. So you can go in and select a tract, you get a basic boundary set of all the various 6 districts. You can see the numbers being distributed among each district. Then you can go down to the block level and start fine tuning things. Where district lines go back and forth, you can sit there and call what they call a 2-stage, where you can select it and you can see what you're taking out from one district and putting into the other district. So you can see a proposed saying, yeah, you know what, that distribution of selecting those different blocks and tracks, those meet our criteria, accept it. So then that can be written. It also has various demographics data that's available, from standard, demographic information to voting age population data that you can look at, to Office of Budget and Management data as well. So you can look at tons of demographic information. And it has the capability of, if you're looking for a certain demographic real quick, you can select that demographic. It throws that layer onto the map to see where you may want to move one of those districts to meet one of those criteria with the demographics and the population. We can also put in current boundary county board districts, precincts, municipalities, so to make sure that if it doesn't go across a certain precinct that's available or whatever that's out there. So meeting those criteria. So it has a lot of functionality to create this map real quick.
The
So,
statute has changed from the last map, because the last map was one vote, wasn't it? Now there's a percentage, and it seems to me that there's so much discretion, because it could be 5% east, 5% west, 5% north. Do we have any idea how that actually works? Because last time around, when I moved something over, then the entire map flipped over and somebody else wanted to come back and change it. You're there every day. Are we gonna have access so I could come in several times a day to see who's proposed what? And now with the different statute, I could propose a map that, how do I know where my 5%, does the map decide whether it goes east, west,
basically,
north, or
with the
south?
system, what the system is, once you come to, say, a proposed map, we can take that map and publish it out to a certain date so you can review it. And then look at it and say, yeah, that's, you know what, I don't agree with that. We need to move that there. So then we can go back and then publish another map. So then you can look at the various stages of as things change over the.
Within that 5% or whatever the statutory.
Whatever the guy said.
And it's not,
Now the question is though, again, get back to what data is available.
and it's not a hard and fast number, Member Pachowski. It's again, it's reasonable. It's basically roughly proportionate versus before, which was absolutely
Yeah, that was,
proportionate.
you changed the house, the whole map changed. I remember those days, so.
And then the question too, the data we've been testing on is the 2010 data, census data. The 2020, like I said, is not available. So if we're looking for June, we need some direction as to what data is going to be used to draw these lines, what population data that we're going to pull through. And that population data has to be associated to those tracks and blocks, because that's going to determine how you're breaking up those populations, to start drawing those lines.
And you need to talk to other counties as far as what they must be a little bit further ahead on us.
Yes, they are.
What's the positives that they got from the new statute? What's the negatives from this new statute? Maybe we ought to pick their brains to see mistakes that we won't have to make in their learning curve with this new statute. I don't know. I don't know any other county commissioners.
I didn't ask specifically about the statutes, but I think that that's a good point. I do feel like we're gonna get a lot of information from our consultant who specializes in this, and they'll be able to really hone that in. But then are we sanity checking it with this information? Is that how it overlays?
Well, that might not be relevant anymore because the code side, his software, I don't know if it's the same or different. I would like to see what they have that you don't have already. Do you think they're gonna have something better than you or the same thing as you?
Well, it all comes down to the data. The tool that we have is going to be very easy, where you can start seeing right away. If they come back and say, well, you have to use the ACS data, that data is formatted totally different. You start pulling from all these various demographic tables, and then right now the software isn't written for that because there hasn't been no direction. I'm going to look further into this prototype data and see what there is, what if this can start being used.
Well, Tom, the only data we can use right now is the ACS, American Community Survey. I mean, there's no census numbers. So
Yeah.
can you look into that and see where we can get those numbers? It's the only way we're going to be able to draw a map.
Yeah, the population numbers should be easy to get that. It's all that other demographic information that you may have to have, like, ethnicity, all that type of stuff that goes into meeting those legal requirements. If I get a list of those,
Legal requirements. I'm drawing a map. Okay.
if there's certain demographics that we have to look at, I can start looking and start pulling those tables out and looking at those.
Member Ozak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question about the ACS data. Do we have access to that right now?
Yeah, the ACS data is available online.
And
Yes, we download those tables.
does it have that kind of ethnic breakdown that we might need to look at?
It does, but most of those are in separate tables. So
Okay.
we have to take those tables. What is it basically is each polygon on the map in the GIS has what is called a GIS code number. It's a unique identifier. Each of those tables have that same thing. So you can have a table of total population that then is joined and attributed to that map feature, that polygon.
So they can be merged.
So the other one, yeah, we have to start pulling, the list of those data. So we'd have to get population from one table, age or whatever, voting age, say from another table. We have to go look
Plus
at those
population
tables.
itself, because if Downers Grove lost 80,000 last time, it's gonna have an impact. And if Addison got X, that's gonna be the crux of the map more than anything else in my opinion.
Population we can get into the ACS data currently.
Well, I would assume so, that would be.
So Tom, can you look into that? Basically, you have to overlay the ACS over the data you have already in there for 2010, right?
Yeah, we'd have to just look at it. We'd have to look and see, you know, where basically you're gonna have polygons with number counts in it. And we could see what we can do to kind of calculate under the current boundaries, you know, county board boundaries. And then we can start plussing and minus, say, from the areas we want to move into one district to another district.
Well, and I think what you're bringing up too on statute, I mean, we're not a House district, we're not a Senate district. There's not going to be ethnic breakdown, but 6 districts throughout the county. I mean, you're not going to draw a Hispanic district and, you know, through with our population. It's just, I mean, I think ours is going to be more based on population, you know, than different, breaking it down by different minorities.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get that breakdown in each district, but I don't think that we have to be concerned about that because I don't think it's realistic.
I didn't know what the full statutes were. If it's just population, then yeah, we can get that data. We can start, you know, getting a basic map and start looking at the plus and minuses of pulling population where they need to go to make those districts evenly.
If you can, and then they will break it down by race and ethnicity, right?
Yeah.
Once you do it by population. Okay, if we can start that, and at least put the old map up and see what those numbers look like, so we get a kind of a baseline where we're going.
Yeah.
Member Rosa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But that's where the fine tuning comes in. If it's known to a board member, this neighborhood, you don't want to split a neighborhood in half.
Yeah.
Or if there's a particular ethnic community, et cetera, where you can at least attempt.
Yeah.
But that all depends on
Well, there's
numbers first, right?
It just, I mentioned this last
Right, gives
time.
us a starting.
I mentioned this last time when we did this back when I just joined the county 10 years ago. That was one of the first things that was brought in. And as we were looking at that district, we had some districts going through houses and apartment buildings because the census data doesn't follow along the parcel lines. So there has to be some moving to make sure that, again, you're not taking you know, going through an apartment complex.
Or parents on one side and kids on the other.
And my question is just
Yes,
on
go-
the timing of that. So how can we have that as preliminary by our next meeting? Is that a possibility?
Let me talk to my staff. I think I at least I can get the data.
Okay.
Because
Because I think we gotta
This
start
afternoon
with
and tomorrow,
we
it's
can't
Yeah,
just
we
have
gotta
one thing
get
on
there.
the
That's
agenda.
Yes.
We gotta start bulking these agendas up and get it done.
Right.
And then my other question, I think we were looking for a video that you might have access to. I don't believe I got that. Do we, I had that Mr. Rickert will send a video demonstration to the
I
committee.
send it to, not I can resend it.
Okay, that'd be
It's a
great.
demonstration of the
Please.
Just so
software
we
that I'm
start to
speaking of.
educate ourselves, I think that would be
Yeah, that would
hugely
be great.
helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
If you go, just real quick, if you go through it's a presentation of the software. If you, the beginning part kind of goes through the legalities of, you know, redistricting. It's not just local, it's statewide because it's Esri, the software, because they provide it to all the states. And
Okay.
if you go in about 12 minutes into it, then you get to the actual demo, the guy actually
Got it.
showing the use of the software.
Okay,
So
that's helpful.
if you go through there and you go, okay, when are they going to show the software? Just kind of advance it to
Got it.
about 12 minutes in and you'll see it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other question on the maps for Tom? No? Okay. We have any old business? No? Any new business?
I just have one request that we really bulk up what's in the packet. I feel like we've been lacking a lot of extra information. So I feel like if we can get some mapping information, if we're in a situation where we have some candidate information, if that can all be included. I just feel like sometimes I'm showing up to this meeting with just the agenda and the previous minutes. And I feel like there's like, for instance, you had that information on that proposed attorney. In my opinion, that should have been included in our packet, just so that I feel like we're lacking information on this committee. So I'd like to see that, again, whatever we get, let's just make sure everybody gets it.
Yeah, and I apologize. I didn't send it out because I didn't want it to look like it was a done deal. Maybe that's my fault. I didn't want to think like, hey, I'm shoving this on you. Let's have the discussion first. So I'll take the blame for that. I didn't want to look like it's like, hey, these are the guys we're going with, and I'm shoving it down your throat. So no, we'll make sure we get plenty of information for our future meetings.
Jason would like to speak.
Yeah, Chair Zay, just one quick thing to that member Chavez. I do want to let you know the RFP stuff won't be in the packet. Or
Okay,
we have the RFQ,
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry,
RFQ.
He means Q, remember
You got me,
that.
Connor. I'm sorry.
Oh, talk.
Sadly, I've always been calling it RFQ. This is the first time I've called it RFQ. Just so you know,
Okay.
because we won't have it until Monday, so that's not something to be posted on Friday.
Thank
So just so you
That's
know,
fine.
that will not appear in the packet
Okay.
because I won't have that information.
All right, thank you.
Well, we can, but Jason, we can email that out
Oh, yes,
Monday,
yes,
right?
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just meant it won't be in the packet itself.
Packet, yeah, right. But we can email it out after we get all the information.
And as we're bulking up on these meetings, that may be the case, that we're getting most of the information via email. I just need more information. So
Yeah. And
however we get it is fine.
And Jason, could we actually just, once we get one, just send it right to the committee members?
If
Would that
is
work?
the will of the committee, gladly.
Is that okay? Then you're not looking at 20 of them. Maybe you're looking at, you're getting 2 on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday, 1 on Friday, 2 on Monday. Is that okay?
I think
Yeah.
that's great.
I will work with procurement on that. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any new business? But it is my intent, Member Rutledge.
Just a suggestion, nothing, to put forward, but you didn't want to put this information out today to make it look like, so in your interest of making this a very bipartisan and open and transparent, I think that if you're having conversations with the state's attorney or staff, I'd like to see those conversations. And of course, you are the chairman of this committee and we will follow your lead. But I think it would be good to include a Democrat on those conversations, not outside or not a problem with OMA. But I think that will give us the confidence that this truly is a bipartisan effort. So that's my suggestion.
Okay, because sometimes I use really bad language as the state's attorney. I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody.
We can take it.
I've said those words myself, actually.
Yeah.
I think
We're
But-
not as sweet as we look.
But no, I mean, I would plan on, if there's going to be a problem, we might not be able to meet on Tuesdays every week. Might have to go to another day just for scheduling that. Is that not going to be a problem? I mean, I'd rather
This
not
is
try to shove
important.
it in on a Tuesday when we're, there all day and maybe do a Wednesday morning or something like that, or, a different day of the week. And we'll probably have to start meeting at least a couple times. Member Pachowski remembers, we might have members come in and work with our GIS originally to show you how the software works and you can take a look at it. We might have 2 districts going at a time and they can kind of present to you and show you what's going on and we're getting more hands-on and seeing what's going on.
I think afternoons are better for scheduling than mornings just because of.
Okay,
other schedules.
Yeah. I do.
Member Ozog?
If we do have members going into GIS to discuss, I would definitely like to be sure that there's at least 2 members present whenever that is happening.
Yeah. No, we'll talk, once he gets that information, we'll talk to him and we'll set something up. We'll set a schedule up that works with all of you.
And bipartisan.
Right, by part, and and then I'm not saying to draw the map, just to show
No, just
originally
to
how it works and all
Last,
the
remember,
bells and whistles.
last time we could only have 2 people in the room, so we had to wait at, what was that, 3 Guys Pizza Place until you could go in, because we only had 2 members in the room at the time.
But definitely bipartisan.
Right, because you don't want to, right, you don't want to
This is
break
an
any
art,
open
not a
meetings act.
science.
Plus,
I'm buying
All right, I'm gonna buy you a drink here, we'll have it, all right.
Drinks.
Okay.
All my stuff is digital, so we can do a web meeting.
Okay.
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely a drink July
Yeah, we
1st.
had-
I'll take it to pizza.
We had to have 2, and then if they weren't there, we had to wait outside until the other 2 were done, so yeah. I don't know if we had any format, maybe we look at what we had last time, as far as procedure, just to discuss.
Okay,
All right, thanks.
okay, and then I think if anybody saw the Capitol Facts last week, I mean, I know they had now said that they're gonna have a map, the state's gonna have a map by May 31st, but there was also an article that said they're talking about moving the primary back. So, I mean, I think it's still up in the air on what's gonna happen. So I know we're all wondering what's going on and figuring out our best plan at this point.
We still want to get going though with the map.
Yeah.
Right, we
you
want
know,
to get going with the map, and then I think other discussion is, once we get going, do we talk about possibly moving the filing date back? That could be another thing too.
Well, that depends on the primary, doesn't it?
Right, but you can, I mean, filing so many days, there's a legal standard and all that we have to figure. I think Kane County has already filed suit to move the filing date back. So maybe we can talk to Kane County and see what they're doing. But again, if that gives us a little more time, if we have to wait for the census data, we can do a map by July 1st. And then again, we had talked about possibly then updating it with the census data to make sure that, you know, we're not getting sued on it.
I like that
But that's a
idea.
discussion for another day.
I mean, I really want to work on census data because obviously I think we all do in this room. So if we can get permission to get one submitted that's in a draft form, I think it's a great idea to then say we are planning on making a few refinements to this with census data that's far more accurate. So
Just for the record, I'm hoping that the legislature gives you that ability. Right now, I would at best say, it would not necessarily be my position that the current law supports that. Current law seems to envisage one map, 1 year, one time, and you're done for 10 years. Unless you got a federal court that says you violated the law, in which case you got to do what the court tells you to do.
So can we look into what King County is doing with their Can you report back to us perhaps at our next meeting and look into what they're doing and what they're asking for? Because maybe if we duplicate that effort, we'll have more voice in the change.
I can call Joe Loves and the chief of civil in Kane and inquire.
Awesome. That would
And
be.
it's an RFQ, not an RFP.
Let's just call it an RF and we'll move
That's what we're here for now.
I
Okay,
think RF is a bit too open.
Request for.
okay. Is there anything else? No? Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Clear roll call, please.
Member Chaplin.
Aye.
Member Chavez.
Aye.
Member Kratuski. Member Ozark.
Aye.
Member Pachowski.
Aye.
Member Rutledge.
Aye.
Member Zay.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.